Hey everybody, thanks for coming through. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. If you want, we'd love to see who's here, who's in the Zoom room. So if you want to use the chat and just let us know, like, what city are you checking in from? Do you organize in that city? Who do you organize with? Why did you come to this webinar? We'd love to get to know you all a little.
Hey everyone, we just want to remind you too that as you're putting things in the chat, to make sure that you use the pull down that indicates that it says share with all panelists and all attendees. Otherwise, you're just going to talk to the four of us, and we would like to be able to have you all talk to each other too. So just make sure that you use that pull down when you have the chance.
And we'd love to hear where you're from, who you organize with, why you came to this webinar. If you can put that in the chat, we'd love to get to know you guys a little. Woo. Hey, hey, so many friends in the room. This is great. Come on in, y'all. We'll get started in a couple minutes, but if you're just joining us, if you can go to the chat and share what city you're checking in from, who you organize with, if that's applicable, and what brought you to this webinar. Hey, hey. Hello, hello. Hey, all right. We got lots of Oakland in the room, but we also got San Francisco, Daly City, South Bay, Los Angeles, Aware LA. That was my first white anti-racist group. What's up? What's up? This is so cool. Michigan, hey. DC Poor People's Campaign. Phoebe from LA, yeah. Alameda, yes. Hello, hello. If you're just joining us, make sure you check in on the chat. Let us know what city you're checking in from, who you organize with, if that's applicable, and what brought you to this webinar. We'd like to see who's in the Zoom room. Hey, Dan. Yeah. Hey, hey. Okay, hello, welcome. If you're just joining us, make sure to check in on the chat. Let us know what city you're joining us from, who you organize with, if that's a thing, and what brought you to this webinar. Hello. Welcome, people. I see Mary Schindler's an organizer. She's got people she brought on this call checking in. That's what's up. We love to see it. Hey, welcome everybody. We're gonna go ahead and get started. So happy that you all are here and you're spending your Thursday evening studying our enemies with us. That is really awesome. We really appreciate it. So intervention in white nationalism. We're doing this webinar right now because white nationalism has been on the rise. And as you all have probably seen, it's definitely had another surge in the midst of this pandemic and the economic crisis that's coming with it. And so we know that as white people, we have a really strategic role to play in this struggle. And so we're really glad that you're here with us. We're gonna talk a little, we'll share a little bit about who we are and kind of how we come to this work. And then we'll get into studying the history of the white nationalist movement, a little bit of it. We'll talk about how it's showing up right now. And then we'll talk about some strategies of how we can combat it. So really glad you're here. And with that, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So we are Community Ready Corps Allies and Accomplices, also known as CRCA. And we are an organization of white people that organizes other white people to fight white supremacy and support the self-determination and self-defense of Black people and other oppressed groups. And we do this, we have a particular mandate to practice what we call the 5 methods of weaponization of white privilege and divestment of white power. So we make a distinction between white privilege and white power. We think that's important. We're a cross-class organization. And so we talk about white privilege being the thing that we have because of the color that our skin is. And that really shapes how we get treated out in the world, how we get treated by institutions. But white privilege and white power are kind of two different things. White power is the access to wealth, land, resources, influence that some of us have more access to than others because of where we're situated in racial capitalism. And so we practice these 5 methods of weaponizing our privilege, like harnessing it and using it against the system that gave it to us in the first place. And we also practice divestment of white power. We believe that white power is really bad for us and for the world. And so we practice giving up control. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. The 5 methods are really simple. This is something that hopefully if you take one thing away from this webinar, you'll remember the 5 methods. These are things that you can practice wherever you are, whoever you are. And so the first method is education. This is about raising our consciousness and other people's consciousness as well. Organization, which is about getting together. We can't do this work as individuals. We're going to need to have a mass movement. And so we got to organize. The third method is contribution, not control, which again is about like weaponizing our skill sets and coming alongside organizations of oppressed people and contributing our skills and our relationships and our resources to those struggles without feeling entitled to dictate those struggles because of our contributions. The fourth method is intervention. That's a lot what tonight is going to be about. It's about preventing and intervening against racist harm and racist violence. And the fifth method is divestment. It's so important we say it twice. All white wealth is stolen wealth. And so those of us that have access to white wealth and white power, we got to divest. We got to move those resources. And again, without demanding control from moving those resources. So again, we're going to talk more about the 5 methods later in this webinar, but this is the most important thing that we can do as white people is we're trying to build a movement. And we're really trying to build a culture where white people everywhere are practicing these things. And they really are practices. It's not a checklist. You don't do it once and then you're done. You know, we work the 5 methods the way an alcoholic would work the 12 steps, something that we do every single day. And we do this work in a direct and a disciplined relationship with Community Ready Corps, also known as CRC. If you're in the Bay Area, you're probably familiar with them. They're a Black liberation organization that combats white supremacy and builds self-determination in disenfranchised communities, particularly the Black community. And they are amazing. If you're not familiar with them, they do incredible work. They've done security and safety work for the movement for years, all the way back to the Oscar Grant movement. They're the ones, you know, if you're out at the car caravan protest, they're the ones making sure that people stay together and are able to drive safely. They do that same safety work in Black neighborhoods in Oakland. There's actually a whole precinct where the cops don't really come because CRC makes it unnecessary. They also have a program called the Safety, Survival, Self-Determination Program that started as disaster preparedness, getting out kits and supplies to Black households that live along the fault line, the Hayward Fault Line in Deep East Oakland, where there's going to be an earthquake at some point in the next couple of years, getting households what they needed when PG&E shut down everybody's power for a couple days. And then when coronavirus started, they were the first ones on the ground, distributing masks, hand sanitizer, and like really critical public health information. And they're a trusted source to be able to do that. This was back in like February, March, when people were saying like, oh, Black people are immune from coronavirus, or coronavirus is a hoax. Like CRC was out there explaining how the virus works, and helping people protect themselves. So they're beautiful, and you should check them out. Check out their website at crc4sd.org. Someone's going to post that in the chat. And you can learn about the Safety, Survival, Self-Determination Program at getreadystayready.org. So this is how Community Ready Corps defines white nationalism. They say that it's a power system based on the concept of white supremacy, that it's the codification of white supremacy into policies and procedures with the ultimate objective of unchallenged white hegemonic power. So that's a lot, but I think there's a couple of things that are really important to understand here. First of all, it's like, it's very intentional and scientific. It's not an accident. A lot of times in like white liberal circles, we spend a lot of time talking about things like unconscious bias. This definition shows us that it's not accidental. It's something that is very much by design. And it really doesn't have much of an ideological center other than the insistence on white dominance and power. And that dominance and power be unchallenged and be unchecked. So it's something that can it can shape shift. It can take any form that it needs to take in order to maintain that dominance. And there's like different styles of white supremacy that kind of compete with each other for like which style is in right now, right? So like, there's definitely like a conservative style of white supremacy and white nationalism. And we see that in the Trump administration or George Bush's administration. But there's also a neoliberal style of white supremacy. And we see that playing out here in Oakland with people like Libby Schaaf and Governor Newsom. I want to give a content warning before we go into the rest of this presentation, because we are going to present and talk about some disturbing and ugly content. And so I just want to put that on the table. We think that, especially as white people, it's really important that we face this stuff. Chairman Fred Hampton says we got to use brutal terms for brutal realities. And we think we have to really face those brutal realities in order to deal with them. But also take care of yourself, do what you need to do, so you can get up and fight another day. The other thing I want to say about this slideshow is you're going to hear a lot from me and from Deb and Sarah tonight. But this presentation, the information that we're sharing and the strategies that we're putting forward really come out of collective study and collective struggle of CRCA and CRC. We've been organizing against white nationalism here in the Bay Area, organized white nationalists since 2016. And so this is our organization's kind of perspective, like what we've gleaned from doing that work. And there were more folks that were supposed to present with us tonight who are dealing with family and personal emergencies. So just want to throw that out there. Okay, let's get started. I'm just going to check out the chat. Cool. Hey, everybody. Okay, great.
All right. Hey, everyone. So before we roll up our sleeves and really dig into white nationalism further, we want to ground in the current moment, which is the COVID-19 crisis. And I want to open up with a reflection question. Why is the COVID-19 crisis such an important period in the fight to end white supremacy? So again, that's why is the COVID-19 crisis such an important period in the fight to end white supremacy? We're going to explore this question a little bit tonight, but this is definitely a question that I recommend returning to and continuing to explore as we continue navigating this crisis. And so the origin of the word crisis comes from the Greek root krisis, which refers to a turning point in a disease, the change which indicates recovery or death. And we know from studying history that material crises often lead to a crisis of legitimacy. This is because the response to the virus so far has been totally ineffective and insufficient. And so we're in a period now where a critical mass of people are losing faith in the established systems, and we're starting to seriously consider alternatives. So during periods like this moment, previously marginalized political ideas can really start to gain traction. And in the right combination of factors, those ideas can become dominant. So we're in a shift in this moment where change is extra possible. And so who's going to gain traction during this period? Will it be our movement for racial justice, to end white supremacy, thinking about a peaceful future where everyone can thrive? Or will the right-wing white nationalist movement be gaining traction here? And so to that end, I want to stress that white nationalists are actively, aggressively recruiting right now. We'll talk more about this later, but just know that white nationalists are taking this moment very seriously, and we on the left need to compete. We need to be using this moment where the system is showing its true face, it's doing what it's designed to do, and we want to be bringing folks into the movement. And I also want to remind us that as white people, we're still a numerical majority in the US, and we have a disproportionate amount of power. And so this means that white people as a group are going to play a decisive role in this turning point. Next slide, Nicole. So I want to take us back to 2008 because that was the last major economic crisis. And so the banks got bailed out, you'll remember. Working class people suffered. The foreclosure crisis was the biggest destruction of Black wealth since the burning of Black Wall Street in 1921. Maybe you've heard the saying, when America gets the sniffles, Black America gets the flu. We're seeing that happen now. We saw it then. We also, in 2008, saw the rise of the Occupy movement, and we also saw the rise of the Tea Party movement. So we witnessed an increasingly polarized struggle for ideas that are competing with the status quo. And so what we're asking today is, if the rich don't pay for COVID-19, who will? Black communities is the answer. When America gets the sniffles, Black America gets the flu. So why is COVID-19 killing more Black people? We'll cover two primary reasons tonight. The first is that essential workers are disproportionately Black and brown, and they're being treated as expendable. They likely don't have access to protective equipment. They might not have access to healthcare or sick days. The second point is that existing economic and health inequalities are becoming exacerbated. So for those of you in the Bay Area, if you haven't visited the Oakland Equity Indicators Report public health section lately, I really recommend checking that out. These disparities are already stark, and now they're really under a microscope. So this is a map of Oakland. I know we're not all from Oakland, but this is where we're organizing primarily as CRCA. So notice which areas are hit the hardest. These red areas, this is East Oakland, and these are largely Black neighborhoods. So we're seeing material conditions becoming increasingly polarized. White professionals are becoming wealthier, frankly. We're able to work from home. We're able to outsource risks like grocery shopping, and we're outsourcing those risks to low-wage workers of color largely. And so because white folks are decreasing their expenses under this shelter-in-place order, we're thereby increasing wealth. People of color, on the other hand, are more likely to lose their job, lose income at this time. They're performing essential, risky labor, and they're more likely to live in overcrowded spaces, or maybe not have access to housing at all. So I know this is grim, but we want to remember that this is a moment where change is extra possible. So. You want to unmute, Nicole? Sorry.
Thank you. So I want to bring forward another framework that we learned from Community Ready Corps. They talk about there being primary predators and secondary predators. So the primary predator is the system that we're living under, right? So like, we know that the United States is a white nationalist project. It was from the jump. We know that capitalism exists as like a white supremacist system. We've never seen a form of capitalism that wasn't white supremacist. It's deeply interwoven into how that system operates. It's a system that operates with violence and abuse and exploitation and coercion, and it teaches all of us to do those same things. And that's really what the all the dominant institutions, how they operate in this country. The economy, the state, the big banks, the major political parties, corporate media, the courts, the jails, the prisons, the education system, right? We could go on and on. So it's a primary predatory system. And it creates secondary predators. So we're gonna focus a lot tonight on kind of the grassroots social movement for white supremacy and white nationalism, because it's really important for us to understand and be able to fight and defeat that movement. But we also have to understand that we're really in a three-way fight, not just with these kind of racist vigilantes and this social movement that we oppose, but also the state and these dominant institutions. And again, like, I think a really important thing to understand about this framework is that it's the secondary predators are doing the work of the primary predatory system. It's like outsourcing. It's really great for that system if we're like harming and killing and controlling each other, then that system has less work to do. And so, yeah, if we have to address secondary predators because they cause a lot of harm and they influence the state. But if we never increase our capacities to also address like systemic institutional white supremacy, these secondary predators are going to continue to be reproduced. So I want to talk about the eugenics movement a little bit, because I think it's a good example of something that started as a grassroots social movement and then became incorporated and intertwined into the dominant system, into the state itself. So eugenics was like a crackpot idea, basically, that coming out of the idea of like social Darwinism, right? Some people are born to be a burden on the rest. Basically, some rich white people were like, how do we get rid of all the people who can't work enough to support themselves, who become wards of the state or burdens on family? So they're particularly talking about disabled people, but also talking about people that they saw as criminals, people that they saw as alcoholics and addicts, people that they saw as having mental illness. And of course, eugenics was highly, highly racialized. White was seen as desirable, Black and brown was seen as undesirable. And so basically, some rich white people got together and were like, this is how we're gonna have an amazing country. They're basically Nazis, and we always talk about the eugenics movement in terms of Nazi Germany, but it's really critical for us to understand that the Nazis got their ideas about eugenics from middle and upper class white people in America. And again, it was just kind of an idea that they had, but some of them had a lot of money and they invested that money into creating institutions that perpetuated this idea and this agenda. And they were really successful. It became an international movement that led to millions of people being killed. And here in the US, tens of thousands of people were sterilized. And about a third of those sterilizations actually happened here in California. So this is something that's really kind of in the soul here in California, if you're watching from California. And of course, eugenics was, really targeted towards the medical system, right? Doctors have a lot of power about like who gets to live and who gets to die, who gets to reproduce and who doesn't. And so the legacy of eugenics is still present in our medical system today. The politics around triage, this idea of like, well, if we run out of ventilators, how do we decide who gets treatment and who doesn't? All of those decisions are shaped by this eugenics thinking, who's more valuable to society, who's the stronger one that's more likely to survive. And I want to shout out the incredible work of groups like Disability Justice Culture Club around, check out the hashtags, no body is disposable and no IC eugenics. They are running campaigns right now to try to intervene against this eugenics logic in our healthcare system today. So I want to talk about how white nationalist logic works so that you can spot it when you see it. Because again, like we said earlier, white nationalism, it doesn't really have much of an ideological center except this need to assert and maintain and enforce white dominance and unchallenged white power. And so it can look a lot of different ways. And these are kind of like the center principles where like every time you see it, it's like a red flag, like, oh, it's that white nationalism thing. The first thing I want to say is that like white nationalist logic is really animated by these strong emotions of shame, fear, and scarcity. And white nationalists who are organizing and recruiting and who are also trying to like advance their agenda and using lots of different tactics to do that are deploying these feelings. They want you to feel shame. They want you to feel fear, and they want you to feel scarcity. Because when people are feeling those feelings, they're more likely to act like fascists and basically tolerate and support authoritarian styles of politics. So when you feel those feelings and when you see somebody agitating around those feelings, take a second look. Okay. Another really key piece of like white nationalist logic is this idea of like black versus white, right? And so it's this binary, and white equals good, pure, and also vulnerable. Also like victims are white. It's weird because it's like white people are better. It's this white supremacist thing, but it's also like white people are vulnerable. And they're victimized. There's this like white victimhood thing. And of course, this part of the frame is the mirror opposite of the next thing we're gonna get to, which is like the dark, scary, violent, threatening other. This is where we get stuff like the white genocide theory. So this meme that you see here is something that started on Copy Pasta in 2000. And it's this idea that anti-racism is code for anti-white. This was the white nationalist response to successful movements for self-determination by Black and brown people in this country. And so they began to perpetuate this notion that anti-racism just means white, and that there's a white genocide that's happening. So another thing I want you to pay attention to, and you're gonna see it over and over again throughout this presentation, is the way that white nationalists co-opt the rhetoric of oppressed groups and appropriate it for their own purposes. When you see white people talking about genocide, when you see conservatives talking about like my choice, pay attention. They're doing a thing. So again, you have this framework of white equals good, pure, vulnerable, needs to be protected, is likely to be victimized. And then the other half of that frame is this idea that there's a dark, violent other that is a threat and a danger to white people.
Nicole, before you go on, we have a question in the chat about if you could say just a little bit more about shame.
Oh, sure, yeah, let's talk about shame. So the shame is like, there's this ideal, this white supremacist ideal, this eugenicist ideal of what it means to be like a good human being. So it's like a good human being is white, but they're also male, and they like make enough money, and they have the right body shape, and they have their brain works the right way. Like there's all these parts to the ideal, and really like it's an imaginary ideal, it's not real. And that ideal gets like weaponized and used against everyone. Everyone, white people, Black people, everyone, because in some way you're degenerate or you're like defective from that white supremacist ideal. Good question, thanks. So this idea of like the dark, violent other, we see this play out, right? Like in all type of mainstream media, both political parties deploy this idea, but we're definitely seeing it a lot with conservatives, the way that they're talking about the caravans coming over the border. They create these kind of like manipulated crime statistics like this. And this is a meme that was aggressively spread on the internet by white nationalists, and it inspired people like Dylan Roof to do things like what he did. Dylan Roof was specifically inspired by this meme to go into a church and murder 9 Black people because of this idea that Black people are a threat to white people, and we have to do something because people are such a threat. So it's this crazy like paradox where, yeah, the fear of the dark, violent other is used to justify a lot of white violence. And if you have this frame where you have like pure, good, white, innocent, vulnerable white people who need to be protected from the dark, violent other that's a threat, you need to have borders and prisons and segregation and containment. So we see this with all of the discourse around the border between the US and Mexico, and why we need that border and how militarized it is, how violent it is. But we see this everywhere, not just at militarized borders and in prisons, but we also see it in things like gated communities in white suburban neighborhoods. It's this idea of containment. We need to keep the wrong people out and the good people in. So pay attention to that. Every time you see a border, every time you see a cage, that's part of the white nationalist framework. Okay, another key part of the frame and really a key strategy of the white nationalist movement is scapegoating. And I'm sure you've all heard this term before, but it's basically just an vast oversimplification of the root cause of a problem, and then the kind of natural common sense solution to this thing that's positioned as like the cause of the problem is just to get rid of this group of people, right? And so it's obviously awful for the groups that are scapegoated, because it ends in people being thrown in prison, people being policed and targeted with violence and incarceration and death. And it's also just bad for all of us because these are false solutions that do nothing to like actually address the real problems that we really do have. So I think like the war on drugs is a great example, right? We've all probably seen addiction and drug use, really harm someone or harm people in our communities. But what this white nationalist system did is it did a war on drugs that was really a war on Black people and poor people. And it threw a lot of people into prison, and it killed a lot of people, and it destroyed communities. And it also spent billions and billions of dollars. And, today we don't have less of a problem with drug use or addiction in our communities, right? So it's a perfect example of scapegoating and how incredibly harmful it is. We see the same thing with the conversations around our economy. In this stage in US capitalism, even white people tend to be like more unemployed and underemployed than we were 50 years ago. And instead of having a structural, real analysis about why that is and how capitalism's working, we scapegoat immigrants. And then that's used to justify policing, locking people up, and killing people. We're seeing it with the response to the coronavirus. There's a racist scapegoating of China. And I know you've been seeing and reading a lot about that. I think the other thing that's really important to point out here is on the right, you have this meme, this alt-right meme. They call it the happy merchant. And this is a gross caricature and like a way to demonize and dehumanize Jewish people. It's really important to understand the role that anti-Semitism plays in the white nationalist strategy, in their logic and their strategy. So the part that it plays in the logic is because they're white supremacists, they can't understand why Black people, brown people are gaining power and are actually having some success, some degree of success in organizing and fighting for and winning more self-determination over their lives. It's a threat to that unchallenged white power that we talked about in the definition, right? But because they're white supremacists, it's like they can't fathom how are these groups of people that are supposed to be inferior challenging our power when we're supposed to be superior. So the logic is it's the Jews that actually, you know, Black people aren't able to think for themselves. They're not able to win things for themselves. It's this other group of white people that's different from us, that's plotting against us, that is manipulating and is really like the brains behind Black civil rights movements and other movements. The other thing that I want to say about like scapegoating and anti-Semitism is sometimes when you'll listen to like right-wingers, you'll feel like, are they anti-capitalist? Like, I feel like we're on the same page about like rich people. They do a lot of rhetoric around, you know, the rich people having too much, but like the way that that they're talking about that is basically they're just like substituting a structural analysis of capitalism for this idea that like Jews are a secret group of people who have too much money and power and are like conspiring to oppress all of us. That's their analysis of how of like economic inequality, and it's a false analysis, and it's incredibly dangerous for Jewish people. And we've seen a big increase in hate crimes against Jewish folks, especially in the last couple of years since Trump got elected and since the alt-right really, you know, started to reach a peak. Okay, this is the kind of the last like part of the logic that we're gonna dive into a little bit. Christian supremacy, and of course it's tied to anti-Semitism, right? Christian supremacy and this idea that there's like a natural moral order that's ordained by God, and that equality, like equality between men and women or between races, or even economic equality is evil and like unnatural. And this is part of the logic, and you'll see it deployed over and over. Deb is our resident pastor rep. Do you have some stuff to add about this slide?
Thanks, Nicole. As a pastor, I have had to wrestle with the role Christianity has played throughout history in oppressing Black and brown people. Christian supremacy is not new. This isn't something that's just come up since the rise of evangelicalism. This is something that has been going on since the explorers left Europe and traveled around the globe. There were priests on every ship, and they participated in militarized convert or die strategies, forcing indigenous peoples to convert or be murdered. This happened wherever they went. Christians had a big role to play as well in the effects of chattel slavery, including not limited to supporting it, but also neighbors turning a blind eye, community members turning away from abuses and the sale of people as property. This is something that we really need to pay attention to, as the mobilization of the religious right is a big piece of this. What we're seeing now is the leaning into the First Amendment and talking a lot about our First Amendment rights as churches to be essential as other businesses. We'll hear the language of how can churches not be essential, but abortion clinics can be are considered essential at this time. This is that co-opting that Nicole's been talking about, where the right will take a hold of something that has one kind of meaning and then will use it in another way. So these hierarchies, these structures are set in place and really Christians have been using the Bible to justify these things for a very long time and continue to do so. As we move on away from religion now, we're going to talk about the move now as it's going to reopen America. This co-optation is no accident. This whole leaning into the First Amendment, this is what CRC calls the persistent reestablishment of white supremacy. White supremacy wants to wants to maintain itself, and people will do whatever they can to maintain their power. These movements are actively pushing back against any movement towards Black self-determination, and we are all seeing the co-optation, the gaslighting, and all of this is really being used in really new and interesting ways that are really quite subtle. So we're going to play a video now from John Ellis, who's a guy in suburban Chicago. He's part of the American Revolution 2.0, Responsible Americans for the Constitution. Who doesn't want to be a responsible American? Who is not in favor of the Constitution? Well, I have a few things to say about that. However, let's listen to John. And while we're listening, listen for the sort of some of the gaslighting that he's doing. Listen for some cue words, things that we might say that he's using, and watch how he takes a hold of a very bad period in history and turns it around. You want to play the video, Nicole?
You have to trust your own knowledge of what's right and wrong, because all of us, we know what's right and wrong. We do. We know when we're doing something wrong that it's wrong. You know, sure, there's the occasion where we don't expect things to turn out the way they did, and it creates a bad effect that we didn't know was going to get created. That happens, but in general, we know when we're doing something wrong. We try to avoid it. Sometimes we try to silence that little voice and say no. You know, and it's easier when all you have to do is nothing. To you know, when it's a choice between doing nothing or doing something, sometimes we go and doing nothing is wrong, doing something is the right thing. Sometimes we go that route of doing nothing because, and you know, we feel like it's not a wrong thing. My dad always had this saying, and he called it a sin of omission. So there are sins that you can do and things that you do wrong, but then there are sins of omission, right? If you're religious, you know, you can call it whatever you want, a crime of omission. If you're not religious, you know, there are things that you can not do that harm other people. And this is what happened, right? This is Nazi Germany. People just watched. They didn't do anything. You know, not everybody was part of the third that was calling in and turning on, which, by the way, are our current polling numbers in the United States. Almost a little over a third would turn in their neighbor if they knew that they were not following shelter in place or these executive orders. That's where we're at currently. That's a scary thought, that a third of Americans would gladly turn you in right now. And that's disturbing. And the way they get away with that is there's a third who are us, right? We're the ones out there going, screw you, forget this, it's not right, I'm not following it, forget it. Well, and that should balance out, right? But then there's the other third. And that's the third in the middle. They're the ones who just watch and do nothing. And because you have 2/3 now, one committing sin, one committing sin of omission, they're able to kill the other third, our third. That's how Nazi Germany went. 1/3 of the population sat and watched while 1/3 killed the other. So we have to be, and we have to push other people to be true to themselves, true to what's right and wrong. You can't just sit by and watch something bad happen. You have to get involved. If you see a cop doing something they shouldn't do, you need to get involved. You need to make them aware they're doing something wrong. It's not okay. Pull out that camera. Start filming that. Go support businesses who are opening. That is what we have to do. And without that, it is not a smart idea to just open up, you know, and just go at it. So that's my tip of the night. Stand up for what you know is right, because you know it's right. And you know you have to stand up, and you know you should. People who didn't go to this protest on May 1st and, you know, are like, yeah, woo, thank you guys for doing it. You know, I mean, I'm glad you're cheering. Hopefully you at least spread the word. But if you did nothing and you just sat there on your couch doing nothing, then there's something wrong. you weren't standing up for what you knew was right. So yeah, you're the problem if you're one of those people.
Well, that was a lot.
Yikes.
Notice all of the head nods, right? There's a head nod towards religion, sins, right and wrong. Notice the attempt to polarize. Good people, making comparison with people turning in their neighbors for not wearing masks to those who turned over their Jewish neighbors. This guy is presented as kind of an American everyman. He's your best buddy. He's your good pal. And the Reopen America movement is presented as something that is inclusive and bipartisan and something we can all get behind. But what we have to remember is that the heart of white nationalism is dominance and power. And the ideological frame shifts so that the dominance and power can always be maintained. This is something that we have to really remember. Ideological frames shift so that dominance and power can be maintained. The transformative ability of American white supremacy isn't rooted in any other concrete value than maintaining dominance and power. This video brings forward the malleable, deceptive nature of this force that we're facing. It's so successful because all they're doing is adopting the methods and the language of Black organizing. Now, think about 2, 3, 4 years ago when we were all telling people, if you see a cop doing something wrong, get out your camera, take a picture, take a video, report the cop. What is John Ellis saying? The same thing. These are the same people who were the Blue Lives Matter people 5 years ago. Let that sink in. They are co-opting our work. They're co-opting the language of Black organizing. The entitlement of white supremacy gets them super creative, and they will pivot from respect the rule of the law to tell people that the cops are doing bad things because they're making us wear masks. Rule of law means whatever they want it to mean. And they will make it mean whatever they want to mean so they can hold on to their dominance and power. Listen, there's even vacillation between whether they believe in Nazism or not, right? And we see here with this picture that's on the slide right now, this is the kind of work that's being done. There in California on the left, we have the comparison of Gavin Newsom to Hitler and talking about the decisions he's making as tyranny. And on the right, this just happened in Chicago, Arbeit macht frei. This is the phrase, the statement that was engraved in one of the entrances to Auschwitz. It means work makes you free. And the initials JB are directed towards our governor, I'm from Illinois, the governor JB Pritzker, who is Jewish. They are making a direct connection between the anti-Semitism that drove Nazis, that put Jews into concentration camps with what's happening today, and they're claiming that for themselves. Whew, that's a lot. The more successful our organizing, we believe, the more co-optation we're going to see. These groups are using tactics taken right out of legitimate movement work to create generic grass tops protests. They aren't connected really to anything real on the ground. It's very much on the surface. That's why we have to follow the money. These so-called spontaneous grassroots uprisings are really funded by corporations like the Dorr brothers, the Koch brothers, the DeVos family, and the only reason these are being funded is to maintain corporate power. There's the contradiction. Grassroots versus grass tops. These aren't protest rallies or even counter protests. They're corporate sponsored lobbying advertisements intended to sway people in the direction of corporate interests. I'm going to turn to another group that's doing work in this time, the My Militia Online Network. This group has been associated with the 3%. This is a group that claims that it is mobilizing to fight tyranny, perceived government overreaches in response to COVID-19. They, on their websites, they offer a catalog of existing militias. They promote programs for setting up your own militia with the goal of trying to get a militia in every area code. In 2017, one of the site users, Michael Hari, and other members of his Illinois-based militia bombed a mosque in Bloomington, Minnesota, and plotted to do the same thing in a second mosque in Champaign, which is just down the road from where I live. It's important to notice these details. Reopen California, Reopen Michigan, those domain names are owned by the same person who owns the domain name for the My Militia Network's online organization. This is not a coincidence. This is not an accident. It is planned and organized. We see the same thing with the church. So I started with the church, I'm ending with the church. This is my role as a pastor. People are leaning into this idea of the First Amendment and how we have to protect our First Amendment rights. Freedom of religion is one of those fundamental rights. The church is an essential business. The church is essential. This is very much a part of this movement right now to try to draw people from religious organizations to come into alignment and into agreement with this work, to say that, yes, we've got to get back to doing all of this because the church is a vital piece of the community. So I'm going to turn it over now to Nicole, who's going to take it from here and talk a little bit more about what's happening in California.
Thanks, Jed. Okay, so this is a photo from one of the Reopen California protests. And take a look, do kind of like a Where's Waldo, I Spy, like if you get in the chat, what do you notice about this photo, about what messages are being deployed? And while you're thinking about that, we want to point out that people tend to think of California as being like the most progressive state. And in some ways it is, but it's also important to understand that we are the state that has the 4th highest number of organized white nationalist groups in the country. 4th highest number of any state in the country. Choice, yep, co-opting choice, talking about the Civil War, yep, it's a lot of white people. Yeah, the choice rhetoric is crazy. Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the groups that was heavily featured in the Reopen California protests that happened recently. And they're not a new group. This group is called the Freedom Angels, and they've been really active in California for the last couple of years. Before COVID, their big campaign was around anti-vaccination laws, and it's our assessment that they're really like basically white women who've been targeted with anti-vaccine conspiracies and are being mobilized. We saw them first when we were actually up at the state capitol in Sacramento last year, fighting for housing justice. And when we walked into the Capitol, we saw all these white women draped in American flags, screaming about segregation and discrimination. And it was like, what is this? And screaming that they are the new civil rights movement. So we see this co-optation of the language that has been successful for Black movements. They were there to protest a bill about mandatory vaccines against the measles in order for children to attend public schools. And in addition to all of this chanting, they were distributing this flyer that you see at the top right-hand corner here that was a really loud dog whistle, basically accusing these 4 Chinese-American California legislators of being infiltrators of China that are trying to like control white families and white children. So again, right, we see that like white, pure, good, needs to be protected, innocent frame, and then, oh, the dark other that's coming in and is a threat. What else do I need to say about them? I think that's about it. And these are some of the other groups that are active organizing in California right now around white nationalism. And if you guys were, part of the resistance to the real upsurge that we saw in 2017, you're probably familiar with this. We'll start down here on the lower left-hand corner, an organization that calls itself American Identity Movement. They're a rebranding of a group that used to be called Identity Europa, which was a rebranding of the American Nazi Youth Party. Basically, this young organizer who was in the American Nazi Youth Party realized that it's difficult to recruit young white Americans to the American Nazi Youth Party because Americans tend to not like Nazis. So he was a smart organizer and he rebranded it, stopped talking about racial supremacy and started talking about being an identitarian. And that's a piece of language to look out for. Also, again, co-optation of the idea of identity politics. Because they do a lot of recruiting on college campuses. They do these poster campaigns to try to recruit new people, and they run folks for student government. For example, they send people into the Berkeley College Republicans. They were really successful in infiltrating this sort of like typically mainstream conservative club on UC Berkeley's campus, and really starting to use it to bring white nationalism more into the mainstream. So they would do these stunts, like they did this affirmative action bake sale. Well, you'll see here, they're charging white people $2 and they're charging Native Americans 25 cents for the same muffin or whatever, trying to heighten the contradictions and about affirmative action. They were the ones that brought Milo Yiannopoulos and Ann Coulter to campus, and they would swear up and down that, they're conservative, being targeted on this liberal campus because they're conservatives. They're white nationalists, hang out with Nazis. If it walks like a Nazi, talks like a Nazi, it's probably a Nazi, and the Berkeley College Republicans definitely are. Then we also have these groups that are like into street fighting, so like the Rise Above movement, the Proud Boys, the Patriot Prayer. They would go to these like free speech rallies and basically like start fights. And they also do kind of just like terror runs, like they'll run through neighborhoods, they'll like harass people, they'll, vandalize buildings, Black-owned businesses. We saw that happening in Berkeley. There was a lot of vandalism on cars around the Berkeley Jewish Community Center during that time. So these are groups you should be aware of, and you can kind of take a look at some of their signals. We'll talk about these more later, but yeah, those MAGA hats are always a bad sign. And frankly, in this political climate, the American flag can be kind of a sign to pay attention to somebody too. So white nationalist groups are organizing on the ground, and they also have really weaponized the internet. And it's really important for us to understand how they're doing that and how that happened. So the first thing I want to say is that there was like a big kind of turning point in the white nationalist social movement, grassroots kind of vigilante movement in 1995 when Timothy McVeigh bombed the Oklahoma City building. It really drove the white nationalist movement underground because they started to get targeted a lot more by law enforcement. And so when they went underground, they went online. And they really started to build all of this infrastructure online. For example, the My Militia Network is a great example of that. And they also really found that online is a great place to recruit because, if you're a white nationalist and you try to go out recruit in public, people are going to see you and you might get stopped sooner rather than later. On the internet, you can kind of sneak into the dark corners of the internet. And they did. They went into the men's rights forums. They went into the incel forums. And they really used like misogyny as a recruitment tool. And then, starting with kind of the Trump era, they started to the movement started to come together. So the folks that were radicalized on the internet started going out and doing live streaming and going to these free speech rallies and filming, you know, trying to catch people doing things. And that's where we saw this like rise in this tactic of doxing, of tracking down people's personal information, finding out where they lived, where they worked, and then mobilizing hundreds of trolls to harass that person, to make death threats, to do scary shit like leave stuff outside their house, you know, wait for them outside of work, things like that. And they even set up like a bounty site where people could post, you know, I'll pay $500 for whoever can find, you know, this person, and find this person's home address. Let's see. Oop. So, cool. Wait, hold on. What's happening? This is a little bit about how white nationalists are organizing in our communities. And now we're going to talk about strategies for fighting back, for intervening. So intervention is one of CRCAA's 5 methods. And it's really about us as white people, like proactively taking responsibility, definitely for preventing and intervening against racist harm and violence, and also taking responsibility for undermining white nationalists' ability to recruit in our community and really making that impossible for them. We believe that's our responsibility as anti-racists. And so I want to show you a little example of what intervention can look like. This is a video from a rally that took place in 2017 when the white nationalist movement was really circling UC Berkeley. And you'll see founder of Community Ready Corps, Terha Ak, really giving just a lesson in how to intervene on these folks.
This is the alleged Antifa / protester meetup. And we're gonna go see if we control some people here.
Situation. How you guys doing?
Hi, how you doing?
What
We're
organization you with?
We're doing a documentary
Okay, about what?
about the protests that are going on this week.
What organization are you with?
We're with the Danish broadcasting system,
Okay.
and so
Pro-fascist or anti-fascist?
we're neutral.
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 All right.
All right.
Neutral. It's hard to be neutral in this environment,
Yes,
but
sir.
hey, you're not coming here to start shit though, right?
Oh, not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
All right.
Got a professional
It's all friendly,
camera
right?
here.
Cameras
So-
are deceptive.
All right.
All right. We're all friends though, right?
Cameras are allowed?
Right.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we're in public space.
They
Y'all
allow us?
not here to dox people, right?
Oh, not at all. What is
All
it?
right, so
I don't
all-
even know
all
what
of this
docs.
is gonna be friendly media.
Yeah, of course.
None
What
of
is?
this stuff is gonna go out death threats and
No,
all that kind of stuff, right?
we're a huge,
Right?
we're a huge public company in
Huge public company. What's the name of it again?
in Danish. Go ahead,
Danish
tell 'em.
company, right?
Yeah, Danish
All right.
company, right?
So this is not doxing material.
No, not at all.
right?
Not at all.
No death threats and none of that's gonna come.
I don't even know what doxing means.
You gotta know what doxing means. That's
No,
suspicious
it
if you say you don't know what it means.
Is that an American thing or?
Yeah.
It's an American thing?
See, I just don't believe that.
Okay, well,
I don't believe you don't know what doxing is, but you all are not here to cause ruckus, right?
No, not at all.
Cause any problem.
Like
right?
I said, we're just peaceful.
My face is not gonna end up on some right-wing site
We're
talking
peaceful.
about I'm a terrorist, right?
We're peaceful here.
All right.
And what is this gathering about here?
It's a gathering against white supremacy and fascism.
Got it. Got it. And are you going to the Milo thing tomorrow as well?
I don't know. Is it even gonna happen?
We've been informed that people are watching your stream, and you are part of the alt-right phenomenon. You are part of the alt-right dynamic.
I don't even know what that.
We've been informed that you all are not friendly media.
We
right?
are friendly media.
Right?
Yeah, we are friendly media. We're not here.
Can we check in on the feed? What's the stream right now? What's the live stream?
Right now we have the.
So I'm hearing folks aren't getting this video, huh? Is that right? I've seen 3 people in the chat say that they can't really hear. It's like a couple frames. It's a bit slow. Can I get like thumbs up, thumbs down? Like, should we keep watching or do you want me to just like explain it? Okay, thumbs up. We're gonna watch it. Sorry for folks that can't see very well.
They're 2 different things.
Okay, this is live streaming.
This is a live stream,
Right.
and this is a film.
Okay, what is this
Right.
live stream? Can somebody check it out?
But why are allowed to read?
Right, because we've been told by people who've done a lot of research and information that this is not necessarily friendly media.
We haven't caused any problems.
I know, but once again, one of the things that this group of people has been combating is doxing.
We are not here to dox.
Film and media that goes out in order to put out people's home addresses.
Oh, no.
So we just want to be clear.
No, we
right?
are definitely not.
We know who this media is, but we're not clear on who you all are.
We are definitely not here to put out anyone's home
no
address.
death threats, no unfriendly.
Swear to God.
Right?
Swear to God.
So none of this will result in people's children's being put on names, mothers and parents and houses and things of that nature. None of this will result in that.
Not.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. I am hot in this. I'm steaming in this sweatshirt here. And so that is the deal with that. Waiting on these guys here. We are completely peaceful here, sir.
Yeah, that's it. That's what
yes, sir.
Make sure everybody's
yes,
safe. That's it. Before, during, and after, right?
Of course.
So I was just informed that Milo canceled the press conference too.
He canceled the, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we did find the feed.
Okay.
Red Elephant, right?
Yes, sir.
Definitely pro-fascist.
I'm not pro-fascist.
Definitely pro-fascist. Red Elephant is a pro-fascist
I am
site.
not pro-fascist.
Oh, come on now.
I am not
Red
pro-fascist.
Elephant.
I am with the Red Elephant.
Oh, right. That is definitely not an
We're
anti.
also with the
That's
Danish
definitely not a
broadcasting.
friendly.
I am friendly. I am not causing any harm to anyone.
No. We didn't say violent.
Right.
It's two different things. Unfriendly and violent are two different things. So we're not claiming that you're violent, but we are claiming that the Red Elephant can be the catalyst for violence on our people.
Definitely not.
Okay. I mean,
I don't know.
I mean, we know that it's unfriendly media. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
So I ask you once again, this won't result in any doxing,
I already said
any terrorist threats,
I already said no.
anybody's families being
I have
called
never
out.
I have
All
never
right, thank you,
partaken
sir.
in any
Thank
of that. See, that's my cue. It's definitely my cue.
So he already told me that they're not here to dox anybody, that they're not here to be the
Definitely not.
way to harm. That's what he told me.
Definitely not.
So he's friendly.
I am not a violent person at all.
Who are you with? What press are you with? I've seen you at some court dates. Yes, sir. Eric Clancy's court date.
This guy's going around and pointing at me and talking to people. So let me go see if I can get these guys to. I feel like everyone knows who I am right now. Yeah, so that guy's around telling everyone who I am. I told you. So we're gonna go see if we control some people here.
Okay, so I hope people were able to get a little bit of that, but that was an example of intervention. A really good example of it. Terha's iconic, as somebody said. Yeah, I definitely agree. And that was really like an amazing coordinated effort of a multiracial group of people who came together to kick white nationalists out of Berkeley. And we did it successfully, very successfully, using some of these principles. So I want to share the principles that we use in CRCA to talk about how to do intervention. The first principle is that prevention is the best intervention. Prevention is the best intervention, right? People say, your grandma probably said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Something that Terha says in his like self-defense seminars is see it before it happens. See it before it happens. So, you know, when we're able to be proactive, we're a lot more effective. When we're reacting to what somebody else is doing, we're at a disadvantage. And so we have to be as proactive as possible and really try to, like, for example, these were folks that were coming to Berkeley in 2017 to hold free speech rallies. Rallies where they were espousing white nationalist and white supremacist ideas and genocidal ideas, but just this speech, right? And so intervening against those rallies being able to be held was prevention. Part of being able to do prevention effectively is having a heightened awareness. And so looking for pre-assault indicators. This is something that CRC talked about when they teach self-defense and how to do security. Pre-assault indicator is like you're seeing something before it happens. You're seeing an indicator that means this person might be a source of violence and a source of harm. And so you're paying more attention to that person. So you can see it before it happens. So hopefully you've learned a lot of pre-assault indicators in this webinar. You're going to start to see things that you couldn't see before. And we really have to do that as white people because there's a lot of stuff that we don't see because of our privilege, and we have to learn how to see it. These are some of the like kind of most popular signals that modern day white nationalists use to kind of signal to each other who they are and what their agenda is. If you see these signals, I'm not telling you to like go fight that person as soon as you see the Blue Lives Matter flag. I mean, I wouldn't be mad at you, but, you know, or if you see a rune, or if you see, you know, somebody do this signal. But you definitely want to pay attention to that person. You want to assess who are they? Why are they here? And keep an eye on them so they can be to intervene. Oops. Okay, second principle of intervention is that intervention is political, not just physical. So we don't mean that physical intervention is not necessary, but we do mean that if our physical interventions aren't politicized, we're probably gonna lose. There's a lot to say about this. I mean, one thing is, hopefully, you know, you guys picked up on when Deb was talking about the My Militia movement. Our enemies have militias. Like, they're very heavily armed in a way that like the social justice left isn't. And kind of like when we're going up against the state, right? It's like, it's kind of hard to fight the state with violence. Like, the state has tanks. If you're going up against the state or against white nationalists trying to use physical force as your primary weapon, you're probably going to lose. But what we will win with is with a political strategy. And with like bringing masses and millions of people to our side to stand with us. That's what we saw after Charlottesville, here in Berkeley, in places like Boston, when thousands of community members came out. Those rallies weren't able to happen, and those groups weren't able to organize anymore. Even this, you know, this Richard Spencer punch was like probably the most iconic like moment of intervention for our generation. And I think it's a good example because it's a very political, it was a very political act. You know, Richard Spencer was in the middle of giving an interview to CNN. And so it was very political to say like, nope, like you will not have that platform. And for people coming out trying to be like leaders in a white nationalist movement, like you will be attacked and embarrassed. So it was effective, not just because it was physical, but because it was political. The third principle of practice intervention is revolutionary discipline. So this was, I mean, Berkeley was a perfect example of this. If people were present in Berkeley for August 27th, and you remember when we had thousands of people coming out to basically counter protests against these white nationalist groups that were trying to hold these rallies. There was a moment where there was like a small group of white nationalists and then thousands of people, and the cops were protecting the white nationalists. The cops were standing between the white nationalists and the community. It was like white nationalists, cops, and then these lovely folks with these shields, and then, you know, church ladies and people like that. And there was this moment where the cops like put their weapons up and pointed them at the crowd, like to fire beanbag rounds at people. And the whole first line of the crowd, these like really militant anti-fascists, they all put their hands up and they were chanting, to protect the people behind them. They were chanting, put the guns down, put the guns down. And not only did the police put the guns down, but they actually left, like they did. And then the white nationalists got chased out of the city of Berkeley. And so that was a perfect example of a disciplined, militant, coordinated mass using revolutionary discipline to win this fight. You know, we have to be really careful as white people that we have to make sure that our intervention is actually creating safety for the people who are most targeted by this movement and not creating more danger. And so something I like to ask myself is like, yeah, is this about creating safety, or is this about like, you know, satisfying a feeling that I have? So that's something we encourage you to think about when you're doing intervention. All right, I'm way off my notes. Okay, so like we said, prevention is the best intervention. That's really like very, very important. And part of what that means for fighting the white nationalist movement is that we have to practice all 5 methods. Like just intervention alone is not gonna cut it. We gotta do all 5 of these things. So we're gonna go revisit the other 4 methods now we've talked about intervention. Education, that's what we've been doing tonight. So thanks for coming and studying our enemies with us. One of our principles of education in CRCA is to know your enemy, to study your enemy. And that's something that we learned from Marcus Garvey. You know, he said that that was a critical part of education, and it's really true. So thanks for taking the time to do this. And if you learned something from this webinar, we hope that you'll share what you learned with your people. You can share this video. It's streaming from our Facebook page, CRCA, Community Ready Corps Allies and Accomplices on Facebook. And we'd also love to do more education with you. So Sarah's gonna put some stuff in the chat. We have next weekend, we have kind of like a overview of the 5 methods workshop. It's really interactive. It's not like this at all. It won't be like us talking at you. We'll be like in breakout groups, and we'll be actually doing stuff. We'll be like practicing the methods in real time. So come out to that if you're interested to learn more. And then we're also getting ready to put on like a deeper dive into the 5 methods, where we'll actually study together over the course of a couple months, like 3 months. So if you're interested in doing some of that deeper study with us, fill out the form that Sarah is sharing on the chat. Okay, another method that really, the importance cannot be overstated, is organization, right? So like as individuals, we can't win. Like we really have to move from seeing ourselves as activists to seeing ourselves as organizers. And what's the difference between an activist and an organizer? Like I once heard somebody say an activist gives speeches, an organizer asks questions. One of the principles that we use for organizing in CRCA is we have to move from separation to connection. So like for a lot of us that identify as white anti-racists, we have spent a lot of time separating ourselves from other white people. I don't know if anybody in this webinar like resonates with that. But I definitely do. Like, I know for a long time, I was like the white girl that was organizing with people of color. And I was not being effective, and I was not doing my job as a white anti-racist by doing that. So to practice organization, we have to like actually connect with other white people. We have to meet them where they are. We have to find our points of connection. Like, what do we have in common? We have to start like being real about our self-interest and our shared interest with other white people. And like, how do we put, I think that it is in my self-interest to defeat white supremacy. And so how do we like articulate that and start to be able to agitate around that with other white people? We want to put forward 3 strategic bases that white people need to have a real strategy to organize to defeat this movement. The first, we've heard a lot about it tonight, is the white Christian community. We know that, first of all, they're a huge political force in this country. There's millions of people who identify with that identity of like white evangelical, white Christian. And they're organized because they go to church, and churches are organizations. So there's an incredible amount of political potential there. And often on the left, we kind of reject religious folks. And I would posit that that's a mistake that's causing us to lose. So yeah, we got to have a real strategy for moving white Christians and like white organized Christians, like white Christian institutions and churches to be part of this anti-racist movement. We also need a strategy for white women. I think sometimes as white women, white anti-racist women, we can kind of let ourselves off the hook and feel like we're less racist than our male counterparts. I think that white women are kind of overrepresented often in like this kind of white anti-racist organizing, like just all of us presenting tonight are women. But the reality is the majority of white women in this country voted for Trump in 2016. And so we're doing something wrong. We have to have a real strategy to address that. And I'd love to talk with y'all about that more when you come to another workshop. And maybe when we have a time for discussion after the material's over. The third group that I wanna talk about, and this is the one that's like, yikes, like it kind of feels like hard. But we need to have a strategy for intervening and organizing the young, alienated, angry white men who are being recruited and organized and radicalized on the internet by our enemies. And then they're sent back out into our communities to do horrible things, to kill women, to kill Black people, to kill immigrants. These are people that we tend to think of with a lot of like hate and disgust, and that's for good reason. But they are our people. Like these people, these young, alienated, angry white men are our brothers, our nephews, our cousins, people we went to high school with, people we work with. And if we don't have a strategy for dealing with them, who do we think is gonna do that? So food for thought, you know, who's that young, angry, alienated white man in your life, and what can you do to reach out to him? Whoa, yeah, I wanna do it, I wanna talk about it. Another method, contribution, not control. So this is really important. Like, I think Berkeley's a perfect example of this. And really, like, all anti-racist struggles have been good examples of this. Like, the times where, like, anti-racist movements have won victories is when we've been able to build strong, multiracial, militant, principled coalitions. And that's really hard to do. It's really hard to do because white supremacy messes us up a lot. There's a lot of shame, fear, scarcity, resentment between different racial groups. And like we as white people, quite frankly, often are the ones to make that coalition building work impossible to very hard and unpleasant because we bring all this kind of like white supremacist framework and kind of like internalize white supremacy into how we show up in those spaces. In CRCA, we talk about contribution, not control, like showing up, contributing, and being willing to like listen to other people and to not demand to be the leaders and to not demand to be centered and to center ourselves. And we found that when we're able to do that, we're able to build coalitions that actually win. And so we encourage you to think about that. And then the last method that's really key in this fight is the method of divestment. I want to take us back to the eugenics movement. And like this really blew my mind when I started learning about it. One of the philanthropists who really made eugenics the thing that it became is John Kellogg, who is the CEO of the Kellogg cereal company. We've all eaten these cereals, right? So he took to this eugenics idea. He was approached by a white nationalist organizer who laid out this pitch of eugenics being the key to solving all of society's problems. And John Kellogg funded those ideas. And then those ideas became dominant in our society and all around the world. And those ideas became reality because of money, because organizing takes resources. And so, yeah, the founding of the Race Betterment Foundation that created scientific studies to support the eugenics agenda, to fund journals, to fund putting that data into like a form that people could understand and then mailing it out to doctors all over the country. All of these things took money and resources. And that's what the right is really good at investing its money in. They're good at, they'll invest in a lot of like think tanks and efforts to create 100-year plans and strategies and to create infrastructure in order to implement those strategies. And an issue that we have on the social justice left is that we also give from our hearts. We often give from our heartstrings. But we give to people that we see as needy, and we give to programs that are about providing relief. And relief is really, really important. And I think it's part of what makes us who we are, is that we give a fuck about people and we want people to survive. And that's great. And we should continue to do that. And we need to actually invest in what the right invests in, but for our side, strategy, infrastructure, institutions that can actually shift conditions over time, that can change the situation. And the other thing I want to say is that we really need, Black organizing is really, really needed right now. Because in my experience, Black leadership always been cool in these movements, movements that actually win against white nationalism. And also the right wing is aggressively targeting and recruiting in the Black community right now. We see people like Candace Owens, right? And Kanye West and these kind of figures being deployed to try to recruit Black Americans to the Republican Party and the conservative right-wing agenda. And, CRCA, we always say that it's never our role as white people to organize in the Black community, to tell Black people what to do or how they should organize or who they should align themselves with politically. But it is our role to resource Black organizing. And the organizers who can and need to have the resources to do real organizing in that community that can rival what the right is doing, because the right is pouring money into that shit. So on that note, we always got to talk about money in CRCA. We encourage you to contribute to Community Ready Corps and the organizing they're doing right now, that they've been doing in the Bay Area for a really long time. They created a fund called the Black Solidarity Fund that funds organizing around this thing called the Black Solidarity Agenda, which was created over the course of 2 years of listening sessions and workshops with Black organizers of many different organizations across different sectors, and also just with regular Black folks in Black communities. They created this agenda, and the Black Solidarity, the agenda is about what could Black self-determination really look like? When would we know that we have it? It's a beautiful document. You can find it at blacksolidarity.org. And the Black Solidarity Fund funds organizing around that agenda. Not just Community Ready Corps organizing, but many different organizations. And so we believe that they are the anti-racist version of the Race Betterment Foundation, and we should invest in that work. So we invite you to do that. With that, we've got some time for discussion, Q&A. I thought I had a Q&A slide, but oh, there it is. I need to catch up with what's been in the chat, but we're interested to hear, we're kind of in a webinar format, so we wish we were in person so we could talk more. But I'm really curious if you guys have questions, clarifying questions about any of the content that was presented here tonight, and also questions about strategy or about how to apply these principles in your particular context. We'd love to talk with you about that. I'm seeing a question about following our work in a way that doesn't involve Facebook. Pike, you're gonna get a follow-up email because you registered for this webinar, and that'll have all of our social media handles, and you'll also be added to our email list. So we will keep in touch with you for sure. Do people have, questions, things you wanna hear more about? Curious about folks on the left who are adopting the tactics of the far right, like ContraPoints. Mary, could you say more about that? What do you mean adopting the tactics of the far right? How do you see ContraPoints doing that? the super aggressive language, like kind of like there's a far right and there's a far left. Is that what you mean? That there's a way where like the left can kind of act like a mirror of the right? Sensationalizing stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think like ContraPoints is an interesting example. I mean, full disclosure, I'm a fan, like a straight fan of ContraPoints, because I spent like a year like really deep in the rabbit hole that is like white nationalist propaganda when I was trying to figure out how to defeat them. And I realized that they had this like incredible amount of media propaganda infrastructure that I did not see a corollary to on the left. It was really, really upsetting. I was like, damn, they are like recruiting people through this propaganda, and like we don't have a version of that. A lot of the like alt-right kind of culture, it's sensational, and it's very like they really weaponize humor. Like they a lot of like their successful recruiting comes from like mocking the social justice left, and they tend to mock things that are kind of like have grains of truth to it, you know. They really put their finger on the stuff about us that is kind of shitty. like some of the stuff about like not being being kind of like humorless and condescending, and like there's ways that we can have a really alienating culture on the left. And so I appreciate about ContraPoints that like she created content and like left and anti-racist, anti-fascist propaganda that was like entertaining and like visually appealing and like not boring, like not just like a talking head. I thought that was like effective. I'm curious what you thought. But yeah, YouTube and like all of these online platforms, there's a fight over like, who controls them and who do they benefit? And we definitely are not winning that fight. The algorithms on YouTube are awful. They're definitely skewed towards kind of the alt-right type, like dark web videos that you can easily, you know, get in your autoplay. And so that's a front we have to, you know, fight on too. CRC talks about like technology being one of the areas of self-determination. Like if we don't control how technology works, we're at a disadvantage. Oh, Risa. So Risa had a question about at the beginning of the video that we showed about intervention, like how Turha knew that this person was not a good guy. So the guy in the video that Turha keeps like asking questions to, his name is Vince, and he is a live streamer with a channel called The Red Elephants. And The Red Elephants, basically like Vince's whole shtick is he'll go into like anti-racist spaces, like he'll go crash like anti-racist workshops, things like we're doing tonight, anti-racist like organizing clubs on Berkeley's campus, Black Lives Matter rallies, things like that. And he'll do and say like provocative things, and he'll be filming, and he'll be sending like this wave of trolls to like find out like who's that like Black woman who is speaking, and like how can we make her fear for her life. There was one part in that video where we blurred it out, but the video that Vince was taking, he was trying to get Cat Brooks's daughter, her face on film, probably to send people after her. So that's why Turha, because we were familiar with the Red Elephants and what they do, and Turha was doing security at this rally, somebody tipped him off like, hey, that's Vince from the Red Elephants, like that's media that mobilizes racist harassment and violence. And so Turha went up and like, you know, we could name the strategies that were used, right? It was beautiful. It was like putting it on the table. Are you pro-fascist or anti-fascist? Like drawing that line in the sand, saying like, this is the boundary. Putting it on the table is really like the best tactic. It's like, is this going to be used to dox people? Is this going to be used to send people, you know, send out people's home addresses? Is my face going to be on a right-wing site talking about I'm a terrorist? Like, really showing them like, we know who you are, we know what this tactic is. It makes people like that, they're really cowardly. They really come in thinking, and particularly that internet culture is all about like, I'm anonymous, like no one will ever see me. I'm just going to use the internet and my phone to like terrorize people and no one will ever know it's me. So when you start kind of like pushing back, makes those people think twice and kind of stay away. But yeah, being familiar with that alt-right milieu and knowing like that person is that streamer that does this like thing is, like Margaret said, identifying a pre-assault indicator. Other questions about what we presented tonight, or questions about like, yeah, things going on in your context?
Nicole, we had a question in the Q&A part of the Zoom that's wanted to know, this person is organizing in Michigan, and we know there's a lot going on in the state capital there in Michigan, and a lot of protests have been oriented in that direction. And this person is asking if we could help them with any organizing that, is there anything that we could recommend to them, organizations, et cetera, from Michigan that they could think about being part of?
That's a great question. I don't have that off the top of my head. There's other folks in CRCA who are from Michigan and who might know more about the organizations on the ground there that would be good to connect with. Is this person with an organization? Not yet. Right on. That's what we like to hear. Okay, this is our advice. Join an organization. You gotta be with, you need a crew. Organizing is like, it's crazy that they don't teach about organizing in school, because it's like the most powerful thing that exists. Like being able to work with other people and have like coordinated power and like build a strategy. There's really no replacement for it. And so it's critical to get organized. So join an organization, find out who's working on the stuff you care about, who's organizing against white nationalism, and get with them. And we're gonna, if you put your email in the chat, we'd love to have somebody follow up with you directly about, maybe point you in some directions. I don't know if there's a Surge chapter there. Surge does great work nationally in cities all around the country. Oh yeah, Bruce, thanks. Yeah, but definitely join an organization. Thank you. Any other questions? I don't know how to see the Q&A.
I've got it, Nicole.
Okay, thanks.
Nope, no more.
Wow, okay, so quiet. Really? We have talked a lot. It's a lot. It's like drinking out of a fire hose, right? Thank you all. Well, we really appreciated you spending this evening with us, and we hope that we'll see you again. We'll stick around here for another couple minutes, and you definitely will receive a follow-up email from us. And then there's a couple more things. I see a question about school curricula, and then I know Deb has some announcements about next steps you can take with CRCA.
We will be sending out a follow-up email because all of you had to register, so we have that information. And in the email, we'll put all of the links that were in the chat as well. You'll be able to connect with us in that way. We also want to remind you, if you can, make a contribution towards the work of Community Ready Corps, and that link is in the chat. If you want to know a little bit more about the 5 methods, we're going to have a workshop on the 30th of May at noon Pacific, and the rest of you can do the math on other time zones in your area. But we'll be going into those 5 methods of organizing, and we would love to have you be part of that. That'll be an interactive workshop, and you won't just it won't just be receiving, you'll be actually participating. And then on top of that, we're about to launch a 7-week study series, which is going to go very deep into each of the 5 methods. And we're going to be taking this up as a practice. So we would love to have you be part of that. That will require a 7-week commitment. And the link in the chat is a pre-registration. It's a kind of, I'm very interested in the 7-week study series, so we'd love you to go into the chat and click on that link. All of these will also be included in the email that we'll be sending you. So that ends the announcements, and we're really glad that you were here.